as always, make yourself at home. We're glad everybody is here. Panelists, thank you for being here this morning. Chris, my first question for you is, where does New Mexico get all the water, and how much water is that project going to use? Do you know?
I don't remember the number off the top of my head, but there's actually an aquifer.
Okay. Because when you said that, I was just trying to figure out where the water is.
Mostly it's an air-cooled system.
It's an air-cooled system. And do you know, I was just recently in Arizona, and Tucson, Scottsdale, Phoenix, they've had some pretty big announcements and building out of data centers. Are they also on an aquifer? Is it a shared aquifer?
There is an aquifer in Phoenix, and they're probably one of the Phoenix area, and I think you'll hear about that from one of the speakers later today about some real-life experiences in that market. But Phoenix is actually one of the leaders in reuse in the country.
Wow. Well, there's certainly really big buildings being built there. Thanks again for being here today. I'm going to start with Grant. You all have met Vince and Chris earlier. Grant is somebody that I work with regularly, along with your local economic developers, as a managing director with Newmark. And Grant not only works this state, this region, but he also works national projects. And oftentimes we get calls. Grant calls us when he has a prospect that is interested in our region, and that can be all things industrial, but also including data centers. So, Grant, why don't you tell us about your experience and background working with and siting data center locations, whether it's Virginia or throughout the country?
Yeah, thank you for the introduction. I'm based in Charlottesville, but have covered the state of Virginia historically for industrial. 24 months ago, that very much became data center related as the boom took off. Much of my knowledge base is based on failure. I'd like to say that. The deals are so complex. And yeah, site selection is driven by power, but also, community involvement now has come up to the top right there behind it with entitlements and everything else. And most of our success stories are with communities where we're dealing directly with economic development authorities, particularly economic development owned land, which you guys become partners within a transaction, which is much easier to navigate because my 6-month project often turns into an 18-month, 24-month project. And when working with the private sector, it's hard to get that extra time.
Okay. So. When you're working on those projects, what distinguishes communities that successfully engage data centers from those that struggle? Not in policy, but mindset and preparedness.
I think events like this in communities, educating the public. What I will say is I only work on hyperscale projects, which are, the 5 big users. The negative press has done a really amazing grassroots campaign. Mm-hmm. The positives of a data center, there is no campaign for that, really. I mean, it's so, educating the public because there's a lot of misnomers. Mm-hmm. And really having entitled sites from a zoning perspective and a community that has at least touched base on the subject prior to going in because the headwinds have become so strong. Mm-hmm. Is very important right now. And I think, it was the board, they spoke about it on their first panel, with how many bills are in front of the General Assembly right now, and that's across the nation, right? This isn't just Virginia. And 24 months ago, I was looking at power, land size, water, sewer, entitlements. Mm-hmm. And entitlements is now, right there with power because so many projects have been killed for that. Yeah.
In economic development, when we're recruiting industry to our communities, we are talking about, a lot of the companies we work with are asking for pad-ready sites and now existing buildings. Does that play a role in data centers? Are they looking for, I can't imagine looking for existing buildings to the size, especially for the hyperscalers, but are they looking for immediately pad-ready sites? What are the tipping points for them to say, we want to look in your region? Is it power, water, sewer? Is it a site? Is it equally? Is it a third?
Every project's different, as Vince pointed out. What I'll tell you is a lot of it's around the power story, right? Because speed to market and the demand is there now. given lead times, and these are, all of these are multi-year infrastructure projects. So having it pad ready isn't necessarily driving it unless I have, 150 megawatts available day one, right? I still have to build a building. It's going to take 2 years. Historically, we've had challenges in this region with pad readiness because of rock and topo. Given the economic magnitude of these projects, data centers are able to evaluate and consider sites that other industries cannot economically consider. It's the power story, because
Okay.
I don't want to build a building and have it sit there for 4 years empty before the power gets there.
Right.
So we try to marry everything else up so that the building's done today, the switch is getting turned
So
on.
they're going to be looking for who's got the power now and what their power plans are for the immediate, near, and long-term future.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean,
Yeah.
it's just, when's the construction load show up? When does, it's like any other construction project, just of greater magnitude. And so you're marrying up, when each subcontractor should show up. And a lot's that construction power, first load, you got to wrap the whole site with power. I mean, it's a massive project. So on the front end, when we are working with the utility, we have a ramp schedule, which will line up with our construction schedule.
Vince, you look like you want to add something, and Chris, please chime in as well. Vince, do you have something you want to add to that, please?
Yeah, so Grant has said this very well. I tend to look at things when part of the role that I do now as this industry leader for data centers is helping to engage with my economic development partners around the state or utility partners, and particularly as we're seeing this push grow outside of Northern Virginia. So there's a lot of communities that recognize the benefits. They've heard some of the concerns, and they're just trying to get their ducks in a row and really understand. So they say, well, what can we do to help distinguish us? We don't have a data center. So I bucket it in 3 categories, and it's speed to market is what the data centers are very interested in right now, and that's all about power. So when Grant says everything's about power, it's how quickly can they get power. If you've got a strong power story, most of everything else can be solved, whether it is an existing pad site or not, whether there's water on site or fiber or any of the other things that are needed to make these operations successful. But right now, power is paramount. So the speed to market for me initially right now is all around that power story. But then they want to mitigate risk, and this is where you all, as leaders, can help in things such as these types of forums to help educate. But Grant also said entitlements have moved way up. So it's power and entitlements right at the top, which touches on both speed to market and mitigating risk. So, and to be clear, I often suggest to communities that they should make the zoning, to mitigate risk, the data center operators are looking for by right zoning, which means data centers are by right land use. It doesn't mean it has to be county-wide or community-wide. You can be intentional. Groups do overlay zones, tech zones. Brian may talk about this when he's on later. You can still be very intentional about the growth that you want to provide your citizens the certainty of this is what data center is going to look like in our community, and at the same time providing certainty to the data center operators that yes, you can do this. You don't need to worry about it coming in and failing through a rezoning process. And then the last piece is being competitive. And typically in most economic development projects, the competitive piece is right at the top as well. Critically important in data centers as well, but less important than that speed and mitigating risk. So tax rates and permitting process, if you got fast track, whatever it may be, all of that stuff can be very important to a particular project. But unless you can solve the power and the entitlement, they mean nothing.
Yes. I was just going to follow up on that and have him explain that. Thank you for asking. Define entitlements for our attendees.
Apologies. We're in this every day so much.
Economic development speak.
Yeah. So beyond the military, economic development, I think, has the most jargon besides the military. Entitlements, just think really what I'm referring to as zoning, making sure that the type of operation that you're looking to attract is permissible through your land ordinance and your zoning requirement. So when we talk about a tech overlay, maybe, in the region you've identified a 500-acre site that just looks like it's perfect, it's got power, it's got water, it's where you want data centers to happen. You can make that site entitled to where there's no questions, data centers are permissible on that site.
And along with the zoning, that comes with height regulations, noise, all of the above, because those are issues that we've already touched on with the noise and setbacks. And
Yep.
Correct.
Absolutely.
What works in your community so the client can say, does that work with us? Great.
Yep.
If it doesn't, they can go to the next
Clearly
one.
defined. Yeah, clearly defined. Which economic developers and communities have been doing for years with all sorts of other industries, into manufacturing and even commercial and retail. I remember for years there were communities who were anti-Walmart because they didn't like the look of the big box stores. But if you've ever been to Jackson Hole, their Walmart looks like the Yellowstone Lodge. And so we learn through the years that if we want something, or something wants to come into our community, and we can put parameters with zoning and ordinances and restrictions to define what we want those to be, whether it's muffins to manufacturing. And that's been useful throughout the years.
And I'll also point out, in a lot of these rural areas that we are building data centers and looking at projects today, there is no zoning around data center. Right. It hasn't been addressed yet, or there's no zoning regarding, or no zoning. In those instances, I think what we're really looking for is community receptiveness and a letter on the front end from the board, saying that it's welcome. It all comes back to mitigating risk, right? And we're talking about billion-dollar projects, and we have to mitigate that risk. And on the front end, before you go out there and sign up with somebody. And we can touch on that later, but I think that's another hard thing in the industry right now is economic development. People like yourself, or whether it's with the utility, are just being bombarded by speculators, right? And it's hard to know how to navigate that because you're shown pretty balance sheets and saying, hey, we're working with the 5 hyperscalers. And a lot of it's smoke and mirrors, right? So understanding who's real and who's not. And Vince can really speak to that about ways to handle that on the front end. Because if you do have an opportunity to attract a data center, timing is paramount, but you don't want to tie up your land for 12 months.
That's right.
With a speculator, because you will have missed your opportunity. Exactly.
And in this region, I would say, and we've got some of our amazing local economic developers in the room, and they can agree or not, but I would say, Margette, Victoria, I would say the last 2.5-3 years, we've been seeing, especially 2.5 years ago, the speculative developer who wants to come in and is interested in our publicly owned industrial land and wants to buy it on spec. And so we have trained each other to make sure we ask, do you have an end user already signed on the dotted line, or is it speculative? Because we have so little publicly owned industrial land in the region, you don't want to lock it up for 12, 16 months or 3 years and then miss all the industries who are reaching out to us saying we want to be in your region. And if you want to know more about the companies who came to us in 2025 and wanted to be in this region, please come to the annual meeting on the 27th and you'll get that. One of the things I want to bring out, Chris Lloyd, a lot of us know Chris. We work with Chris on a regular basis, but I want you to know that in addition to Chris's title, he is in the top 200 international corporate site consultants, and we're really lucky to have him in Virginia for sure, and he's a friend of this region and the Regional Business Alliance. He does a lot of site consultant work on a variety of industry sectors. So Chris, I want to give you props for that, because your success with manufacturing goes far and wide. And a little tidbit to talk to him after hours is that he was part of the Frito-Lay decision to land in Lynchburg 40-some years ago now.
30.
30, yeah, plus or minus. But the reason I bring that up, Chris, is from wearing the site consultant hat, what differentiates Virginia from other fast-growing markets like Texas, New Mexico, Arizona? And, as I told the group last night at dinner, and I mentioned this morning, Arkansas just had that big announcement as well.
Sure, no, I appreciate that, Megan. I think what distinguishes Virginia is we're a market that, particularly in Northern Virginia, but other parts of the country, are already dealing with data centers. If you're in Arkansas, there aren't a whole lot of data centers in Arkansas. There aren't a lot of data centers in New Mexico yet. There aren't many in Montana or Wyoming or a number of other states. And I think Virginia, I won't call it a mature market, but it's a market where at least we have some degree of sophistication and understand what they are. We've had tax policies, regulatory policies in place, whether it's regulating generator air emissions, whether it's dealing with the water issues that come with data centers, whether it's dealing with some of the power issues. We've been thinking about these issues for a long time. Sometimes we've come to decisions that are adverse to data centers. Sometimes we have come to decisions that are welcoming of data centers. But at least we've had the dialogue in Virginia. It doesn't mean it's always easier in Virginia than it is in other places. But I think that the infrastructure is there, not only the physical infrastructure, but the mental infrastructure is there that allows Virginia to stand above some of the rest. And a lot of other states do look at Virginia for leadership on those topics.
And this is for the whole group. What's pushing the data centers that have all been focused on Northern Virginia? What's pushing them to look to the most beautiful parts of Virginia, which would be us?
I'll start with that,
yeah.
And that is land for data centers in Loudoun County. The most recent sale was anywhere from $4 to $6 million an acre.
And
now those are small sites. They're 10, 20 acre sites.
$4 to $6 million.
$4 to $6 million an acre.
And are those publicly owned land?
Now,
are those publicly owned?
No, those are privately owned sites.
Okay.
A lot of them are churches that are selling out, recreational facilities, others that are selling out. Now, again, the cost of land for $1 billion data center is infinitesimal compared to what you're going to spend on your racks and your servers and your power and all. So, yeah, it's $4 million an acre, but if you need to be in that market, you're going to do it. But I think they're also seeing that, a number of the communities in Northern Virginia, again, they're small sites. And they're looking for, as we talked about in the over breakfast, is companies are looking for larger campuses. They're looking for room to spread out so they don't have to deal with some of the buffer issues and some of the noise complaint issues and some of the site issues that people have expressed concerns about in Northern Virginia. Remember Loudoun County, I talked about them earlier, how much money they generate based on data center taxes. They do not have favorable tax policies towards data centers. They charge the full rate. You pay the same on a data center for the equipment as you pay for your car, $4.70 a hundred. In the Richmond area in Chesterfield County, you pay 40 cents a hundred on your data center equipment. So they're starting to look for other places in order to be more friendly to data centers.
And I'll say a lot of that too, and you spoke about this in the first panel with the fiber infrastructure, which is driving a lot of that cost. And it goes, this goes back to why they're searching here too. That with billions of dollars of investment, they like to cluster their investments and use those resources, right? And so with Northern, you can watch the development of data centers as it's spread down 95. But I will say they've ended up in this part of the state because AEP still has generation availability versus Dominion, who's has very long lead times at this point.
Yeah, and so not much to add here. A couple of things, though, I think is critically important. So a lot of folks think the data center industry spreading outside of Northern Virginia is new, and in large part it is. But it's also worth noting that today, I mentioned this earlier this morning, that Virginia is the largest data center market by far, and it's like 4 times. Now, people are catching us for a variety of reasons, but we are still the largest by far, and that is a lot to do with Northern Virginia. But if you exclude Northern Virginia, the rest of Virginia is still, at least per the Northern Virginia Technology Council's 24 report, the rest of Virginia is still a top 10 market in terms of capacity. So the Richmond market, Culpeper, and others, Virginia is
Mecklenburg County.
Mecklenburg County. Yes, thank you. How could I miss that? So while some of the activity that we see in this part of the region and others is newer, data centers have been operating in Northern Virginia and outside Northern Virginia for quite some time now, and that gets back to why Virginia power is paramount. You've heard us say that a couple of times. We've got the expertise. Our utility partners have more experience energizing data centers than anywhere else in the world. So when we commit to things, we've got proven ability to be able to follow through on our commitments. I did want to circle back briefly to the spec side of things because I think it's critically important, particularly for audiences in the room. And you mentioned Margette and Victoria and others that are seeing the spec side of things that come. There are, to be clear, from a data center industry, you've got, we all love dealing with the hyperscalers or end users, the AWSs, Googles of the world. These folks are buying, building, and operating immediately. Most of them are not doing land banking. Their capacity needs are so big, they want to be running, immediately. There's a next level group of developers, and there's a wide variety of those, QTS Stack, Digital Realty, Edge Core, and I'm going to leave off a bunch, and I don't mean to do that, but those folks are working with end users all the time, and in most cases, they're building because they know the capacity needs that are out there. Where we need to be guarded is because of the windfall of cash is so large in this space, there's a number of folks that are entering the market that have zero experience, zero data centers in operation. And not suggesting that those folks won't be successful. It's about power, and industrial development is in large part industrial development. But even those developers do different variety of things. Some do land improvements, try to get entitlements, and don't go vertical. They don't build buildings. Others do it all and go all the way up to powered shells and just sell the energy, and the end users come in, put in space. So as a community, you're getting those calls, there are just a couple of things right at the top of the list that you can ask. And the first, from my perspective, is have them confirm how many data centers they have in operation and what's the megawatts of those. And be clear to say in operation and not in development, because a lot of people will throw numbers out and they're actually using sites that are, quote, under development, and they've purchased 300 acres here or 500, and they don't have anything in operation. So if you just ask that question and nothing else, and you're dealing with someone that's got a significant amount of megawatts currently in operation, they've got that demonstrated experience to do that. And that is critical at our level to be asking early.
Megan, may I add one other thing about why Virginia? And that is something that we gloss over and we haven't mentioned today, and that is the supply chain for data centers.
That was my next question.
Okay.
Yeah, so get into the supply chain. What is the supply chain that's for the data centers to be built and then to be sustained? And what part of that supply chain is in the region or in the state?
Sure, I'll start with that, and I'm sure Vince has a lot to add to it as well. But people criticize data centers for not having many jobs, and if you compare it to a 250,000 square foot warehouse, it's a lot fewer jobs. They pay very well, but it's fewer jobs. But you look at all the people that it takes to not only run that data center, and I'll let Vince talk about that, but then all the people that are making the equipment. And Virginia's in the heart of the supply chain. You've got companies here in this area or in the Roanoke area. T-Mike has a major presence, which is a joint collaboration between Toshiba and Mitsubishi, which makes a lot of the switching equipment. You've got Eaton, which just announced a major expansion in the Richmond area. You've got Corning in North Carolina and here in Virginia that is making the fiber, the fiber, the line, the glass that goes into fiber line. So there are hundreds, if not thousands, of jobs just here in Virginia. Or when you then add Virginia, North Carolina, South Carolina, and Georgia together, we're really the heart of a lot of that manufacturing that is supporting all that goes into a data center, the chips, the servers, the racks, the cabling, everything that goes into it. The multiplier effect of these facilities is absolutely huge.
Yeah, no, there's so Delta Star and Modine both are local that are supplying the industry as well. So the JLARC study that we mentioned earlier, I believe they accounted for the industry as a whole was roughly 74,000 jobs between direct and indirect jobs across the state. We think that's a little bit conservative. We are working to better define that supply chain story because I do think it's something that we have missed because it is just so broad across the state. And I think almost every community in Virginia in some way will have someone that is touching, and it can be manufacturing. I like to tell this story. It's one that I'm a military veteran, and I was just love this idea. There's a company called American, and there's a couple of vets that started a porta potty business up in Northern Virginia, and they were supplying some construction sites in Nova, and they've grown and grown and grown and grown, and now they're doing it across the region. And again, you don't think of that as economic developers, certainly trying to have porta potty from a state level economic developer, I should say. But it's an industry that is directly supporting. And then the last thing I would say about this as well is it's also worth noting that a lot of the trades support the industry as well. So electricians and others are big. Again, Chris talked about while fewer jobs, very well-paying jobs within these facilities. So they're supported at the trade level as well. So it's a great way for kind of blue tech is a term that we've used for folks in HVAC or electrical to come in and be a tech worker.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would say 90% of our industrial activity last year was data center related 3PL companies and suppliers across our region, like specifically here in Virginia.
So pull out a map of the U.S. and look at where the data center clusters are in the U.S. You look at Northern Virginia, you look at Atlanta, you look at Columbus. There's actually an interesting cluster starting around Charleston, South Carolina. You start drawing lines and connecting those. Guess where all those lines intersect? Right here.
The Lynchburg region
is where they start to intersect. And so the possibility, so again, you know, the old Levi Strauss line, don't just mine the miners.
Yeah.
And there's the opportunity there for you as well.
And we have seen and made it to the altar, but didn't get married with some supply chain manufacturers. I know Paul Denham was a part of one. We had a visit from a Texas manufacturer that was manufacturing the air handling systems that went on the roof. Was that? Yeah, and they absolutely wanted to be in this region. Pam, I can't remember if you were the economic developer at that point, or if it was still Tracy. But they wanted to be in this region, and they did not choose us. In fact, they never made the expansion. We should probably circle back with them now that I think about them. But we do see the supply chain come to this region with RFIs and visits to be a part of our plan. There's a question on the back here I'm going to bring up. In the region, of course, we have 5 localities that make up our region. If a data center were to choose, let's say, Amherst County, what's the benefit to the surrounding localities? Is there a benefit? What would that benefit be?
Yeah, I'll start. So Grant mentioned just a few minutes ago how they like to cluster. So I'm going to go back to a project we announced roughly about 3 years ago. It was an AWS really large project opportunity. We announced that in January of 23, a project that I worked with a number of other folks for about 5 years, and they originally started just in Nova. Technology advances, some of the stuff that we talked about allowed them to go further and further out. The Fredericksburg region, one kudos to them, the community, all the communities within the region rallied around a tax rate and depreciation schedule so they wouldn't be competing amongst themselves. Not suggesting that you all do that, but it was quite attractive to the data center community. So AWS made this large announcement in a community that did not have a lot of data centers. And today, Chris mentioned Spotsylvania, Stafford, Caroline County. There's been a growth of others because of this clustering effect that once you land at a hyperscaler, it is common. It's a lot like the McDonald's model. You'll see a Burger King pop up across the street or however that works. So there is a clustering effect. There's also jobs. I can't stress enough about the jobs, while not as many really high-paying jobs. And then again, the supply chain opportunities that we're talking about. So there certainly is an advantage if one particular community is the landing point, kind of the anchor, and watching it grow from there. But there are also some resource constraints and such within the region that we touched on earlier that would be addressed from the community as well.
I'll add two other things, Megan, if I might. First is don't forget the construction workforce. These facilities are not just under construction for 6 months, but they're usually moving from building to building to building to building on a major campus. So you have a construction workforce in the hundreds, if not thousands of people for some of these facilities for 3 to 5 years. That's a lot of people eating meals, a lot of people spending money, a lot of people staying at hotels in a community that has benefit throughout a region. Secondly, these facilities need a workforce. And so many of them are partnering with the local community college system on certification and credentialing programs. And that is a lot of those skills in HVAC, plumbing, in cable splicing and all aren't just exclusive to the data center world. So they, the Microsofts and the Googles and the AWSs may be the one that's partnering with Central Virginia Community College to develop the program, but the certifications, credentials that come out of that program have multiple applications across other industries that are going to make you more attractive to other manufacturers to the region.
And we currently, as a region, are the top of the supply chain for one amazing sector. Do you know what that is, Alan? Nuclear. Yeah. So we're accustomed to being the supply chain supplier to a really growing, thriving sector, which we couldn't be more proud of. So there is that opportunity for us in this region. I've lost track of my final question before I open it up, but I think it's back here. Or was it up here? Oh, I think this question about, can anybody speak to the bubble bursting? Whether it's I think there's the AI bubble bursting. I don't know that the data center bubble might burst, but we hear conversations about giant or large data centers. Technology changes every day. We've seen that, right? From the flip phone to the phone we have now. And the data center technology is going to change. If it goes from uber large buildings to not needing that space anymore, do we treat it like any other industry, manufacturing, when they change and decrease in size, we just find other uses for their buildings? Are communities having those discussions? I'm hearing it, like what happens if it changes and they don't need what they need? And
yeah, I mean, I think that's a conversation you're seeing in news headlines for the last 8 months with the amazing growth in the industry. Vince, you touched on the 21 items hooked up to the internet. What I will tell you is the 5 hyperscalers are not slowing down. Mm-hmm. In fact, they all have the same message when you're in the room. If they don't spend the money now, they will be irrelevant in 5 years. Mm-hmm. And it's hard to fathom that and how much fast the world's changing and we're all being connected. But the end users who are spending the money are not slowing down.
Right.
So
I just think that every industry is being transformed right now.
Yeah.
And just because, when was the last time you went and visited a travel agent? When was the last time you walked into a physical bank? They're all changing. And that doesn't mean we're not going to build more offices in this country. AI is starting to take a huge role in medical, diagnostic and treatment. That doesn't mean we're not building more doctors' offices. We just need to understand that change is going to happen. You be smart about it, and you do things that are going to be sustainable long term. But you can't say, well, I mean, I grew up, I'm of the Generation X. The mall was everything. When was the last time any of you went to a mall, a traditional mall? Nobody saw that Sears was going to go belly up.
No.
No one saw that Kmart was going to go belly up, except for Dustin Hoffman and Rain Man saying Kmart sucks.
Yeah.
You never saw this. So you can't say, well, we're not going to make these investments. We're not going to do these things because 30 years down the road, it might change. Every industry is changing year by year. Mm-hmm. So you do things now that are smart and take advantage of what you can do and be prepared for that there is going to be change in the future and adapt.
Yeah, and on top of that, and I think this is kind of macro to look at, and we're seeing it from the traditional industrial thing and dealing with economic development, my clients are reluctant to give you job numbers because those are changing every day with robotics. Yeah. And so e-commerce, traditional manufacturing, which are the industries, that we've all chased and gone after historically, my clients are not giving you job numbers or committing to those long term. So it makes it harder for you to give your prize site away without that commitment. What I'll tell you is in the data center world, these companies are committing to that site for 15 to 20 years with the agreements that they're how much money they're going to spend. So, it's balancing the two in a changing world.
And I know this, we have AEP will be here, and we'll chat about power. But I think underlying, when we have these discussions about data centers, of course, power, water always comes up. But, we do need to address on the power side is the infrastructure for generation in general, for generation of power for all of us. I think the power generation is a big issue that is critical to not just the data center discussion, but for national security discussion. I mean, power generation in Virginia, power generation in the United States. I think it's a bigger item. I think impacting all of our futures and our development. And Vince brought it up earlier about AI and what you call it, ML. A lot of our manufacturers in this region, their equipment reports back to another location using data centers. The machinery now is talking to the mothership in another location. And so it's in all aspects. You talk about the home, but traditional manufacturing is rarely traditional anymore because it's incorporated into the machines. Whether it's reporting the power usage, it's reporting the number of cycles or spins it's taking, or the number of pieces of product it's putting out. So before I wrap up, questions for this panel? Yes.
Yeah, so I'll touch on that again. I'll refer you back to the JLARC report. So the stat that I used was JLARC found in its report that it published in December of last year that in Virginia, 83% of our data centers use the same amount or less water than an average large office building. We've said a couple of times that each project is different, and I will say typically, if you use less water, you use more electricity. So air-cooled is HVAC, so it's one or the other. So what often happens...
Does it have to be one or the other? Can a data center be both, utilize both systems?
It certainly can, but if they use more water, they're going to inherently use less electricity, at least on the cooling side of things. Again, what they will likely do is if the power company says, no, we can get you 100 megawatts of power, they're going to use 100 megawatts of power. Whether or not they're doing air cooled or not, they'll just put more racks in versus using it on the cooling side of the equation. But what we see in the site selection process is it's the client, they are asking the questions about water availability and all the other things that go into it. So while they may ask about some large number, and each project is unique in and of itself, what they're trying to understand is what's available. So while they may say, I need this much, if the community comes back and says, we have this much, they'll make the determination if they're able to work with this much. And also worth noting is when they are asking for this much, it gets back to Chris's point earlier, they're talking about the high days in the middle of the summer, for a couple of week period of what's their worst case use. So these folks cannot go down, as Chris said earlier. So they are preparing for the worst scenarios. Doesn't mean that they're going to use that volume on a regular basis. The point that I was just simply trying to make, and I think Chris's stat, and I'm going to have to get that again because I had not heard that, around golf course use versus data center is pretty striking. So yes, they are heavy water consumers, some more so than others, but if you compare it to other industrial uses or to the golf course, water tends not to be something abnormal compared to the other sectors out there that are using it. I think that was the point we were trying to make.
Yeah, in this region, when we market the region, we market it as a resource-rich region, and water is one of those things. And so we target manufacturing. We target the sectors who use water in their process or their product. Because that is an asset to our region. And you put a data center in, it's a manufacturer, you put it in that same light, water comes into play.
Food and beverage process and pharmaceuticals,
Food and beverage,
those kinds of things are high
Food and
water.
beverage, pharmaceuticals especially. Other questions? Yes, Alan. Yeah, take it away.
Start.
You stack well for various reasons. You're in Virginia. This whole game is about mitigating risk, right? I'll say you're in Virginia. AEP still has a very competitive process compared to some other utilities around the country, and still has some generation availability. I think Chris spoke about land prices in Loudoun, right? So there are core markets, which he mentioned, which is Columbus, Atlanta, Texas, Virginia. Those will always be core markets because of fiber infrastructure and optionality between cloud and AI training, which are two different things. So Virginia is always going to be a hotbed for that. The fiber system is like the interstate system. You just can't say tomorrow we're going to move that 30 or 40 miles to the west. So we stack up well. It's a power story. They want to cluster these and be as close to those major markets as possible, but it comes back to the power and when that availability is, right? And what I'll tell you right now is, and what I'm hearing from our calls that we're on, Dominion's 2032 to 2034, when they can do a new site, right, and give you that power. I think that in your region, as we sit today, those timelines are much better. And I'll leave it at that.
I'll walk through what you haven't done. Yeah. And that is, you haven't set the tax policies yet. Vince already referred to, and not maybe Fredericksburg in the model that you want to do, but at least coming to some thought for how are we going to tax these? Are we going to take advantage of the right that the General Assembly has granted localities to have a preferential tax rate for data centers? This region hasn't confronted that yet in a uniform way or even in a consistent way. What you have not done yet is come up with, how are you going to do this from an entitlement or zoning process? Are you going to do tech overlay districts and defining that so that people understand what the rules of the road are going to be when you come here? What you have not done yet is looked at what Southside Community College or some of the other community colleges have done yet in order to put in place the certification and the training programs that are necessary to support the industry. That has not happened yet. And then I think this today is one of the first steps in doing this, but it's the final one, and that is building the political consensus that this is what we want to do. And it's not that it is seemed as a hostile region. It's just it's a blank slate in people's mind. People don't know what it would be like if someone came to this region.
Yeah. Great question. Thank you. Barry, the last question, and then we're going to go to break real quick. Well, thank you for your question, everybody. It's time for... Yeah, and we'll get to that at a later panel with Whitney, with APCO, Appalachian Power. But panel, do you want to? I mean, certainly that comes up
I think we'll
all
go
the
into,
time.
I think we'll go into more detail, but let's look at some of the other factors that are driving power rates. We have underinvested in the transmission infrastructure in this country for 40 years. It is falling apart.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's anybody's fault, but we haven't invested in that transmission infrastructure. And whether it was data centers or not, we had to make those investments. Second, the cost of everything just to build the transmission system or keep it going has gone up. Everything's gone up. The price of copper has gone up. The cost of labor has gone up. The cost of just building the equipment has gone up. Just the inflationary epidemic that we've had in this country. So that's contributed. The cost of fuel has gone up. Thank you, Russia, for invading Ukraine, because we're all paying a tax because of that, because of what it's done to the instability of energy prices. And actually, if you look at facts, and we'll talk about this later, I'm sure the Wall Street Journal and the Washington Post have just done very good studies on this and shown that the states that actually have the most data centers have actually seen residential rates decline relative to the rate of inflation, because what you're doing is you're taking those fixed costs that I talked about earlier, you're spreading them across a larger base.
Yeah, and I'm just real quick to add, you started by saying it's a NOVA piece. I want to just be fair to others. Some of the concern, it's not just NOVA. We're seeing it wherever you go. So eyes wide open. If you are going to consider data center, these types of questions, there are going to be concerns. We will certainly talk about it more in detail. I would add this, again, coming back to that JLARC study. JLARC found that to date, the data center industry has paid its full freight. So that's an important note to add. And as Chris mentioned, there are a couple of recent publications that not only have found that they're paying their full rate, but they're actually in some markets helping to lower the rates.
On the table tent with the QR codes, the middle QR code is the JLARC, the direct JLARC study QR code, if you want to go direct to that. Let's have a round of applause for our panel, please.